if I had been actuated by the spirit which prevailed with the Bourbons, said he, or even according to the law of reciprocity, I should have caused the Duc d'Angoulême to be tried in retaliation for the attempts he had made upon me, the prescription against my person by the Bourbons, and the declaration of the Allied powers placing me out of the pale of the law and inviting my assassination by the laws of the National Assembly existing against any of the members of his family who should re-enter France. I should have had him shot within 24 hours. Instead of doing so, I ordered that every respect should be paid to him and care taken of his person, and that he should be conducted to set for embarkation. Maitland, said Napoleon, was not an accomplice in the snare that was laid for me by your ministers when they gave him orders to receive me on board of his ship. He is un brave homme, and incapable of participating in the infamous transaction that took place. He was deceived, as well as myself, and probably in bringing me to England, thought that I should have been allowed to live there subject to such restrictions as had been imposed upon my brother Lucien. He then observed that he had formed too good an opinion of the English, and that he believed the influence of the voice of the people upon the ministers to have been much more powerful than it was in reality. Previous to going on board of the Bellerophon, added he, some debates were held upon the propriety of the measure. Some naval officers to whom it was mentioned strongly urged that I should not venture on such a step. They said the English are the most interested people on earth. Interest is their God, and they will calculate what may result from ill or well treating you. If they think that they shall gain anything by it, they will hurry you away and bury you in one of their colonies, where you will be exposed to every species of bad treatment that hatred can suggest. They were right, added he. Some of them had been in the pontons and knew what you were better than I did. I did not conceive it possible that a great nation could countenance the persecution of a man who had fallen into their hands after having been 25 years their enemy. He then delivered as follows some explanation of the causes which had produced his fall. Had it not been for that fatal suspension of arms in 1813, to which I was induced to consent by Austria, I should have succeeded. The victories of Lutzen and Wurzen had restored confidence in the French forces. The King of Saxony was triumphantly brought back to his capital. One of the corps of the French army was at the gates of Berlin, and the enemy had been driven from Hamburg. Russian and Prussian armies were preparing to pass the Vistula when the cabinet of Austria, acting with its characteristic perfidy, advised the suspension of hostilities at a time when it had already entered into engagements with Russia and Prussia. The armistice was only a delusion to gain time necessary to make preparations, it being intended to declare against France in May. The unexpected successes obliged it to act with more circumspection. It was necessary to gain more time, and negotiations went on in the Congress of Prague. Metternich insisted that Austria should have half of Italy and made other exorbitant conditions which were only demanded in order to be refused. As soon as she had got her army ready, Austria declared against France. After the victory of Dresden, I was superior and had formed the project to deceive the enemy by marching towards Magdeburg, then to cross the Elbe at Wittenberg and march upon Berlin. Several divisions of the army were occupied in these maneuvers when a letter was brought to me from the King of Württemberg announcing that the Bavarian army had joined the Austrians, and to the amount of 80,000 men were marching towards the Rhine under the command of Reda, that he, being compelled by the presence of that army, was obliged to join his contingent to it, and that Metz would soon be invested by 100,000 men. This unexpected defection entirely changed the plan of the campaign, and all the preparations made to fix the war between the Elbe and the Oder. They all became useless. At Leipzig afterwards, I was victorious on the 16th and should have succeeded on the 18th had not the whole Saxon army, which occupied one of the most important positions in the line, deserted to the enemy with a train of 60 pieces of cannon, which were immediately turned against the French. Notwithstanding this, the field of battle remained in possession of the French, and the Allies made a retrograde movement on the same day. During the night, I ordered the army to retire upon our supplies behind the Ister, the defection of some other German corps afterwards, and the premature blowing up of the bridge at Leipzig caused the most disastrous effects. When the army had passed the Saale, it should have rested to recover from its fatigues and receive ammunition and other supplies from Erfurt. Intelligence, however, arrived that the Austro-Bavarian army under Wrede had arrived on the Main by forced marches, and it was necessary to march against it. Wrede was driven from his position at Hanover, completely beaten and himself wounded. Conferences afterwards took place at Frankfurt, and proposals for peace were offered on condition that I should renounce the protectorate of the Confederation of the Rhine, Poland, and the departments of the Elbe, but that France should be preserved in her limits of the Alps and the Rhine. Those conditions were accepted as bases. This Congress, however, like the others, turned out to be a delusion, as at the moment that those Pacific proposals were made, the Allies violated the neutrality of Switzerland, which they entered in large force. At Châtillon afterwards, they presented their ultimatum, in which they demanded that France should be reduced to the limits she had previous to 1792, which I rejected. Had it not been for the subsequent treachery at Talleyrand, Marmont, and Augereau, the Allies would not have succeeded in forcing upon the throne a detested family against whom for 25 years the nation had combated, and France would not have been degraded by the spectacle of a king upon the throne who had the baseness publicly to declare that he owed it to the Prince Regent of England. 28th. 27 volumes of books were sent to Longwood by Sir Hudson Lowe on the 12th, and 7 on this day with some numbers of the Lettres Normandes de Champenoise. These form the entire of the supply of books and pamphlets sent to His Majesty's minister or through them since the arrival of the Phaeton in 1817. Napoleon observed, "C'est une bassesse dont je croyais pas même que Lord Bathurst fût capable." This is a baseless of which even Lord Bathurst wouldn't be capable. It has been the rule for some time that all captains of merchant ships which arrive are obliged to submit a list of their books, newspapers, etc. to Sir Hudson Lowe, and those of a political nature are specifically required to be sent to him under a pretense of desiring to forward them to Longwood, where, however, none of the books have arrived, and but very few newspapers. The Edinburgh Review is especially sought after by His Excellency and staff. April 4th. Some days ago, a circumstance occurred which threw some light upon the motives which had induced the governor to oblige me to visit Plantation House twice a week. One of the foreign persons residing on the island informed Count Montsalon that the commissioners had seen an account of the state of Napoleon's health in the bulletin of that day. Count Montsalon, knowing that no bulletins were issued by me, asked for explanations, which were given, and by which it appeared that surreptitious bulletins were made by a person who never saw Napoleon, and who consequently could not be a judge of his complaint. Those fictitious reports were sent from Plantation House to the commissioners and transmitted by them to their respective courts. I apprehend that every conscientious reader will be of opinion that those bulletins ought to have been shown to me, I being the only medical man who saw the patient, and consequently the only person capable of judging of their correctness. The 10th. Sir Hudson Lowe, having failed in the application that he made in London to procure my removal from St. Helena, had recourse to an expedient which ensured him success. He caused a letter to be written to me this day by Sir Thomas Reed, in which he informed me that I was not to pass out of Longwood without assigning any reasons for a measure by which it appeared that the governor had imposed upon me restrictions even more arbitrary and vexatious than those which he had inflicted upon the French, for by confining me to Longwood within the precincts of which he allowed no persons to enter without a pass, he deprived me of English society, while at the same time he prohibited me from holding any other intercourse, even with the French, than that relating to my profession. As soon as I had received this letter, I went to the Briars, with the intention of laying the affair before Admiral Plampin, who sent word by his secretary that he should not see me. I then wrote a letter to Sir Hudson Lowe, tendering my resignation, and another to Count Bertrand, in which I explained the step that I had been compelled to take, and the motives which urged me to adopt it.